If you embrace the seasonality of life and start living seasonally, you'll find that it's the most natural, creatively stimulating way to continue propelling yourself forward. And by being in tune with your body and nature around you and so many other things that I'm going to talk about, you can really start to achieve your best personal growth. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Vaguely Related. Got a cute little background today, which I think is fitting for our life should be seasonal. It's summer now. Actually, it's like just the beginning of summer. So a whole new season that I'll talk about that we can all start to get into and prime our creative minds towards. But yeah, this is gorgeous, isn't it? This is not my apartment. This is my mom's place. I am in Wisconsin right now just for this current season of my life, but I will be moving to San Francisco in 2 weeks, which is crazy to think about. I'm so excited for it. I have a lot of updates to share. So the idea that I'm going to focus on today is something that's just been like itching on the corner of my mind for a while now. You know, it's one of those things that if you think of the subway takes guy, I don't know if you know who he is, but that guy who comes on the subway and like asks people questions of what their big hot take is, I always imagine this would be mine. He would come up next to me and be like,
"So what's your take?"
And I would be like, my hot take is that life should be seasonal. And he'd probably ask, what do you mean by that? But the idea of a seasonal life is something that I first recognized when I was working in the restaurant industry in New York, which was just a couple months ago now, even though it feels like forever ago. But it blew my mind when I had all these coworkers who were working insane hours every week. Like at the restaurant I was at, they'd be putting in 50 hours and then they'd have another job that they were doing during the day and put in even more hours. And I had no idea. I was like, how is that sustainable? And it isn't for the full year, but for this certain period of their lives, which was the fall and the winter, when a lot of the restaurants are at their highest capacity and have some of the biggest clientele coming in, they're able to push themselves. And then in the summer, I had some coworkers who were able to just not work the entire summer because they'd put in all the hours and all the work for themselves so that they could save up and have the entire summer to do whatever it is that they wanted to do. But that is just, for me, coming from a 9-to-5 job into the restaurant industry in New York and witnessing that, it blew my mind. And then that whole idea of pushing yourself and resting and kind of doing it in a cyclical manner is something that I started to think about, not just for a job, but for an entire lifestyle or being. And I wanted to do some research to see if there's anything of note for it, and I found so much. I found that philosophers like Sartre, Kierkegaard, writers like Anne Lamott, they all had opinions on this that all just made so much sense, and I don't know why I'd never heard it before. And then I found the same thing in the way that famous pop stars and artists were making their big projects and their albums. It all comes back to this idea of seasonal living, which is the most natural, most creatively stimulating way to pursue your personal growth and find your full potential. So there's a few different ways to talk about and think about seasonal living. I'm going to start off with the one that I saw most often that I think is just the easiest to understand, and that is living actually in accordance to each season. That's not necessarily the whole point I want to take with this video. I think there's a more nuanced way to look at it and how it can affect your daily choices in your life rather than just each season, each like winter, fall, spring, summer. But there is a lot to say about how we live our lives in each of these seasons, so I'll just go through that quickly too. So when you think of summer, the season that we're in now, it's a season when things flourish, a season when the sun is out the longest, when it's maybe the warmest out, when people are together. I watched a bunch of videos to see how people interpreted this into their own lives, but when I think of my own too, summer is that time when you relax, but you're not doing nothing. You relax in a way that you maybe connect with more people. Like think of the summer breaks that we used to have all that time off in summer, college, or whenever you had your last summer break, which is kind of sad to think about. But a lot of jobs too, like they'll give you summer Fridays, and it's a period where you rest, you know? You come together with people. You maybe make some new friendships that you haven't had before, even new relationships, a summer fling, who knows? But it's not necessarily your highest output for productivity. And then when you transition to the fall, think about how this is a time of harvest. And in your personal life, it can be a time of introspection. It's a time when you notice the things around you and you start to prepare yourself for the season that you know is coming, which is winter. And winter is that period of deep rest. Winter is a very important time of self-discovery, and when you think of it like what's going on outside at that time, it's a very important time when things grow, but you don't necessarily see that growth, and that's okay. You don't need to be productive, but even just sitting with yourself, getting to know yourself, you're thinking when you're bored. You know, when we have all these distractions, we're not necessarily allowing ourselves to think or get to know ourselves, but when you give yourself time to do that, you can start to spur the imagination that will then transfer to spring when you have this period of newness, of productivity, of creating all these new and wonderful things that you're able to create now because you gave yourself space to do so and to sit with it in the winter. And so this is a common way that people talk about the seasons that I've seen, and I think it really makes sense when I think about it in terms of just how I feel when I go throughout the year. You know, winter depression is definitely a thing, and then in the summer I find myself wanting to hang out with so many more people than I usually do, and it's just, it makes sense, you know? As humans, we exist within nature. We can't think of ourselves as something separate from it. But I also want to make sure people know when I talk about life being seasonal, it's not just like getting a pumpkin spice latte in the fall, okay? Yes, there is also a lot that I've seen of people talking about eating seasonally, making their own gardens and harvesting them seasonally, and I think that's great too, but that is not the point of this. This is about using seasonality as more of a metaphor for how to live your life and how to unlock your personal growth and change through that. Because living seasonally is a process. It's a creative flow that allows you to have these productivity periods and these slowness periods. And it's all about not pushing yourself 100% all the time, because we know, well, maybe you don't know, but it leads to burnout and it's not healthy, and it doesn't allow you to find that personal growth or even have time to stop and think of what that growth might be for you. When you can accept these productivity and rest periods, these highs and lows, then you can accept that good things take time. And you can allow yourself to appreciate not just the abundant periods of life, but also the more lonely and hibernating ones. And while this is something that I've just recently been practicing, and I can't say that I've gone through every season an entire year doing it yet, to see those low, lonely periods not as punishment, but as growth periods, I think opens up such a positive mindset that I just love. And so in terms of personal growth, which I think this seasonal structure of living is really great for, these cycles can allow for breaks, but they also allow for a certain sense of urgency that people who are always going at 100% don't ever see in their lives. And I saw this video on TikTok about this woman talking about sprint months, and you can think of it kind of like a 75 hard or practicing the artist's way for a few months. It's going all in for a month, going all in for a certain amount of time. And the amount of change that you can see in yourself in just 1 month, in just like even 3 months, is insane. I know even for working out, I was unreasonably obsessed with weightlifting in college. I feel like everybody has a period like that. But I committed to this program that I was doing for 3 months, and I literally had abs. Like, that's insane. But at the end of 3 months, the amount that I could like deadlift and do actual big girl weightlifting things was crazy. You can completely transform your body in 3 months, by the way. It's kind of insane. But this can apply to anything. If you dedicate yourself to having a sprint period in your life, knowing that you're going to have rest at the end, you can get so much more done than you could ever do if you're always just trying to push yourself. Because if you're always at 100%, all I can think of is an annoying physics metaphor, but like velocity, okay, that is the speed that you're going, and it can't change unless you have acceleration. You can be going 100 miles per hour always, and there's zero acceleration there, and you can get somewhere, okay? You can get pretty far doing that too. But you can't ever go faster or get slower without some kind of acceleration. And it's that cyclical nature of allowing yourself to have those periods of accelerating and decelerating that can give you the rest that you need to recharge, so that when you do have those big sprint months, you can give it your all in a way that you could never give it before if you were just trying to do the same thing all the time. And like I was saying before, when you have those rest periods, that's a time of reflection when you can think about what you want to do in your sprint month. If you're always giving 100% to whatever it is you're doing, if you're always just pushing hard for that big promotion and you work all the time and you don't allow yourself to think ever, and when you come home you're so exhausted, all you can do is watch a TV show and go to bed, you don't even know what it is that you want. You don't have time to set these goals for yourself. And not even goals, like let's not even make it a productivity thing. Like in terms of your creative expression, if you don't give your brain the time to be slow and to develop your imagination and just notice things around you, then you're never going to know what it is that you want to push yourself in. And again, this can be related perfectly to nature. Think about a seed, the small little thing that you need to grow. You put it in the ground, not seeing it for a long period of time. You know that you put it in the ground. You have to trust that you are giving it water and you are giving it enough light so that someday you will see it grow. But that growth does not happen right away. And the only way to allow that growth in yourself to happen is to be an active participant in your life. And that's to give your personal energy to something that you care about so much that you want to be giving all of your energy to it. If you find yourself on autopilot mode, kind of just going through the motions because you don't feel like you have that thing that you care enough about, that can be a depressing life, honestly. And some of us don't even recognize it because it's kind of the norm is to go through life in these motions and follow what everybody else is doing, especially when we're asked to consume things all the time and there's so much information that's just coming at us that we don't have time to think about ourselves. And it's not selfish to think about yourselves. Actually, that's the most human thing that you should be doing, is getting to know who you are, because that's the only way that you can know how you're going to make yourself happy or joyful or where you should put your energy. And then when you find that thing that does make you happy, maybe when you have that period of time in the winter where you just end up reading a bunch of books because you feel like you don't want to go outside, you have nothing else to do after work or before work, and you just are kind of tired and you don't want to hang out with friends, and that's okay. And then through reading those books, maybe you discover that you actually have a love for classic literature or Shakespeare or something like that, and then you start writing plays. I don't know, but when you can discover what you like and you can discover that pursuit that you want to give your energy to, then you can become an active participant in your life and start giving that energy to that thing so that later it can grow and it can change your life exponentially. And you would think everybody wants that. Everybody wants to have that thing that's precious enough in their life that they want to nurture it and they want to make it grow. And then it doesn't feel hard when you're putting all your energy towards it because you find love in the process. There's another really great metaphor that I saw from some kind of graphic on Instagram about how when seasons change, some things stay and some things go away. They were talking about this in a different context, but it really made me think. And so I kind of developed it a little bit on my own so I could apply it to this. And it was with things like leaves, branches, and roots. So when you think of a tree, when seasons change, the leaves might not stay. The branches might fall. They might still be there, but they're not always as steady. The roots, there's something that's always going to be there. And so with leaves, those are the things that float by. They change with the season, they fall, they grow back. And it's okay to think about things as being impermanent in your life, like a leaf. Things like jobs, hobbies, interests, even and especially appearance are things that are leaves in your life. We have to be okay with letting them flow away and come back and grow again. It's okay to get a new job in a new season. It's okay to find a new hobby later in your life. It's feeling stuck and trying to hold on to those leaves when they're dead, that can disrupt this equilibrium and make you feel like you're stuck because you're holding on to it. It's totally okay later in your life to go back to school and try something new. We are multifaceted people with many, many interests that we develop throughout our lives. And I think it's more absurd to say that we should know this when we're 19-year-olds and then keep the same career for our whole lives, because then we're not giving ourselves time to grow. And maybe it is the right career that you picked when you were younger and you're able to keep that for your whole life. And honestly, that makes me jealous because that's amazing. But more likely than not, we are going to change over our lives. And so it's okay to have these leaves that we let go of, that we let die, and that we let grow again. I have already had so many leaves in terms of hobbies. I am maybe the kind of person who goes all in on a hobby and then kind of drops it. And I'm trying to get better at this. I'm trying to hone in my focus, but I used to be an Instagram page person. What I mean by that is I think I've had probably like 15 Instagram pages for different businesses or hobbies or whatever. I used to have a graphic design Instagram, and when I say graphic design, that was me in middle school making little like the hand reaching out of the dirt to the one lone flower, like Pinteresty kind of things that were horrid, and that is long gone. I had a thrifting Instagram when I was into that for a while. I got to sell some things on there. I had a jewelry making Instagram. I actually had a whole business with that. That was really fun and I really enjoyed. I had that weightlifting Instagram, of course, and that was a hobby of mine for a point in time. I had a real estate Instagram. I was, for about 6 months of my life, a real estate agent. I guess without sharing too much about myself, I'm just trying to show that like when we change and grow, our hobbies change and grow. And all of those things have been in the span of like the last 10 years of my life. Like we have so much time. And when you think about that sprint month, that amount of change that you can create in your life in just 1 month, in just 3 months, it's crazy to think about how much change we can make. And it's exciting to me to think also that I have all these possibilities that I haven't discovered yet. Moving on to branches, the next part of this. The branches are those things that as the seasons change, they remain, but they might get brittle or they might break if too much pressure is applied. And so that means it's something that is likely going to stay in your life, but you can't always be certain of it. And so that can be things like passion or joy points in your life, things that you're pretty certain bring you this joy, but you also could be willing to let go of if something changed in your life enough. Things like skills and your learned experience and knowledge you can rely on, but only to a certain extent. And it's these branches that we use to define ourselves a lot in our lives, but we have to be careful of defining ourselves by, because this passion, this skill, this experience is not who we are. It's something that we've told ourselves that we are. But the roots are who we are. The roots are what we can always rely on and what will always be there, because that is our identity and that is us. Your roots are things like your family, your community, your faith, your morals, and even your soul. These are things that you know who you are at the end of the day. If everything is taken away from you, if you have nothing but yourself, you have at least your soul, your morals, and your faith to rely on, and your family, even if they're not available for you or they're not there for you, they still are your family, and you can't do anything about it. So these roots are what we need to tap into when we have these slower periods of our life and we feel like we don't maybe have a hobby or a thing to put our energy into. If we go back to our roots, then you can start to sprout branches and sprout leaves, and grow. And on the point of self-improving, philosophers have so many opinions, but this idea from Jean-Paul Sartre, I think, really defines the idea of reinvention. And that's his famous quote that existence precedes essence. So what that means is that you can constantly reinvent yourself. It means that you're not a fixed being. That means that you're ever changing, ever becoming, that you have the power to create meaning for yourself through your own choices and actions. And reinventing yourself is not a one-time event. It's something that can happen through the span of your entire life. And that's why I think this seasonal approach is so important, because it gives you the space to have time to reflect with yourself in those slower periods of your life, whether it is winter and summer, or it's just whenever in life you feel like you have too much going on and you need to slow down. You can allow yourself that slow period in life, and then that will help define when you reinvent yourself later. I saw this TikTok on loneliness and self-improving, and I think I really related to it too, because I just am not one of those people who can always be hanging out with people. I love when I'm with the right group of people, the right friends, when I feel recharged when I'm around them. And there are times in my life where I feel like I'm always, like every weekend I'm doing something. I was going out with people or always going out to coffee with people. But then I'll also have these periods in my life where I just need to be alone. If I'm going to a coffee shop and someone asks if they can come with, I just kind of have to nicely say no, because I need to think. I don't know. When I'm alone, there's just a certain level of introspection and closeness I get with my thoughts that I can't when I'm with someone else. Even in college, when I know a lot of my friends would do their study groups together, there was times when I just needed to be alone, because there's such a different kind of thought that happens when you have no one else to perform for, when you're alone, and especially when you can be somewhere in nature where you realize maybe how small you are, but in a great way that allows you to connect with things around you. And maybe I'm not making sense, but I've noticed this pattern in my own life that when I have these slow periods, I often need to be alone more, so that when I am productive later, maybe a few months later, I can make more friends and I can be a lot more social, because I allowed myself to get to know myself a little bit better, and then I can be my truest self and my most authentic self when I'm with these people later, because I gave myself that time to get to know my own self, if that makes sense. But there is truth to the fact that loneliness and boredom spurs imagination. And so in terms of creative growth, it's really something that's important to give yourself space to have that boredom. And if you watched my last video, it can be very, very hard to have any kind of space in your head when we're constantly being exposed to social media, digital platforms, algorithms, AI, all of these things that are telling us what to do. And it is at a detriment to our own creative output and critical thinking. So if that sounds interesting, I would recommend giving that a watch, because I learned a lot just from making that episode too. And it kind of scared me actually afterwards. And there's a lot that I am thinking about in my everyday life now because of it. But another philosopher, Kierkegaard, is known for saying that we should not be striving to be something, but to constantly be becoming. And so what that means is that we shouldn't be striving towards a certain idea of ourselves as something. Like, we shouldn't be striving towards, I will be a novelist. I will be a CEO. I will be da da da, something that puts yourself in a box. We should be striving to every day become something closer to what it is that makes us happy. The way that he talks about this is through a success orientation of life versus a faith orientation of life. And so living your life success oriented makes your life something that is defined by that success, and then in turn also makes it defined and wrecked by any kind of failure. It's a kind of life that's like, if only I can get this, then I'll be happy. If only I can get this promotion, then my life will be perfect. And everybody knows that that kind of thinking just never works. Once you get to that point where you do get that promotion, your life is the same. Nothing actually changes. And then you feel this emptiness because you were looking forward to this one thing in your life that you thought would make everything better, and nothing changed. But when you live your life by a faith orientation, Kierkegaard says that it's simply risk with direction. And this faith-based way of living your life is about embracing the risk of our vulnerable existence, which is that whatever you choose to do, you could have chosen to do something else. And yet you're choosing to live this way every day because you find it to be worthy of the finite time that you have on earth. And so living that way can help narrow the way that we think about our lives, not in terms of these big, grand things that we need to achieve, but in terms of everyday choices that make everyday life worthwhile, which is what life is. Life is little everyday moments that make you happy. Happiness is not something that can be achieved. It's something that's experienced. And that's why things like dreaming of summer or waiting for the weekend just never work, because you're telling yourself that what you have now is not good enough, but that maybe one day it will be better. And then you're giving all of your energy and time doing things that you maybe don't enjoy every day to reach this goal of this, even if it's just the week, to reach this goal of the weekend. And then once you get to the weekend, it'll feel empty. Life isn't meant to be one big uphill run towards something in the distance. It's rolling down the hill and prancing in the valley. It's a beautiful, cyclical thing that provides us with the highs and lows that if we can learn to appreciate, will start to flow us towards a more joyful, more authentic state of being. So mostly I've been talking about this cyclical, seasonal way of living as a whole way of living and even as like a creative practice, but it is interesting to think about in your career, in your job too. And I saw a lot on the 9 to 5 and how it's almost directly against our natural rhythms. So if you didn't know, the 9 to 5 was actually created in 1914 with Henry Ford when he had the Model T factory that kind of changed manufacturing and the industry as a whole. When the 9 to 5 was first released, it actually was way better hours than any manufacturing workers had ever experienced before. And so it contributed to a much higher output and much more efficiency among the workers. And then this, of course, brought a lot of success to Ford and all these other big factory managers. So then everyone wanted to roll it out, and then they did. And it stuck. Since 1914, we have had the same 9 to 5 work structure that was at first meant for manufacturing workers and now has been transferred over to the knowledge workers, which is what this New York Times article calls it, but are like white collar workers, or I guess I would call it email workers. But it was never based on any kind of science on the human brain, on how we work, or any kind of productivity. And when you think of how humans were working before this, it was all agricultural work for the last thousands of years that was dictated by the season. And then out of nowhere, this influential person, this boss, decided to create 9 to 5, and we stuck to it and even made laws about it. And now our brains are always burning the same every day, and there's no period for rest. And this goes throughout the entire year, even though people want to slow down in the summer, people want to slow down in the winter, people get sadder in the winter, yet they still have to work these 9 to 5 hours, and they're expected to be just as productive. In this New York Times article that I read, it said that intense periods of cognition must be followed by quieter periods of mental rejuvenation. Energized creative breakthroughs must be supported by the slower incubation of new ideas. And then it goes on to talk about how influential people, successful people, all had these periods of time where they had to get away or rest. Like Georgia O'Keeffe had to flee the city in the summer to find this quiet inspiration for painting. And then Lin-Manuel Miranda, when he was writing In the Heights, even though he could have finished it earlier, he had to allow himself time to remove himself from it, to step away from it so that he could come back to it with an even stronger, more productive, and more inspired mindset. In this article, it says that it's the grinding regularity of manufacturing that's the outlier, not our instinctual attraction to a more natural pace of work. There's this doctor slash podcaster that I love called Huberman Labs that talks a lot about this. And well, he has a video on circadian rhythms, which is how our bodies work throughout the day. There's also something he brought up that's called an ultradian cycle, which I had never heard about before, but is about how we focus. And so ultradian cycles show that people can only really deeply focus for 90 minutes at a time. And after that, there's no efficiency in work or focus, and there needs to be breaks in between to allow for our bodies and our minds to come back with that same amount of focus. You would think that would be important for employers to think about if they do want efficiency, but that's something that we have to be thinking about. And so if you are in your own 9-to-5 desk job and you're in these slower cycles of your life, like in your summer season or in your winter season, or just any kind of period in your life where you feel like you need to take a break, it's things like this that we need to pay attention to our own natural cycles in our body. And so what Huberman Labs suggests is that after 90 minutes, or even before, because 90 minutes is the max focus, you should step away and do something that does not take immediate focus. So that means not even scrolling on a phone, because that is something that our eyes are directly focusing on and is taking cognitive energy from our brain, even if it feels like it's not. The best thing to do is to go on a 5-minute walk, or just look outside if you can. If you can't stand up, just if you can find a window to stare at, because all we need is 5 to 10 minutes of a break for our brain to give ourselves time to reset. And that's the whole point of this seasonal, cyclical living, is giving yourself those times to reset, because you cannot expect yourself to be giving 100% all the time. That is just not possible, and that will create burnout. And that's because rest increases readiness. Creativity is something that is not fixed, and if we treat it that way, we're only ever going to stifle it. Imagination is something that grows as we grow, that morphs with everything that we consume in our day-to-day lives, from a TV show that we're watching, a Substack article that we read, a book that we read, a person that we interact with. Inspiration can come from literally anywhere, and it can inspire not just art or creativity, but the things that we can envision ourselves being in the future too. In this essay I read by Courtney Cassidy, she says that productivity addiction, like other types of addictions, is a coping mechanism. It's a habit formed to ward off emotional distress that gets louder when the mind gets quieter. A habit that can go on for a while before you realize you're actually suffering. But eventually, working hard on terms that don't feel naturally good leaves little space for reflection and no time for refocus. And so that's why you need to find the flow that works for you. Not every person is going to work their hardest or their best in the fall and the spring, or be able to rest in the winter or summer. And not every person is even going to be able to go month by month. Maybe they need longer periods of time. But the point is to have fun in the process, to feel like you can be inspired and joyful and, playful in the process too. Because the process is what everything is all about. There was this really great interview of Earl Sweatshirt that he had this just really vivid metaphor that I just can't stop thinking about, so I want to share it too. He was talking about how he feels like his life is in a flow like a heartbeat. And when he visually was talking about a heartbeat monitor, so how it goes up and down and up and down and up and down. And he used to be so worried about each of those ups and downs and focus on all of them. But then when he found his true equilibrium and his true creative flow, he was able to find a through line through the beats of the heartbeat, so that when it went up and down, he didn't worry about it.
Like that stopped scaring you. Like that motion stopped scaring you so much. You kind of plan on it. That I haven't really treated what's been bestowed on me like the blessing that it is, which is sometimes just simply enjoying it. Like I don't have to overstate the enjoyment of it. Sometimes the enjoyment of it can just be enjoying it.
And that's that faithful living, not that outcome or success-based living that I was talking about from Kierkegaard before. And I think it's important when we think about ourselves as creators, or just ourselves in our everyday lives too. I know I've seen so many videos on TikTok recently about people trying to be influencers, and they're all like, you have to post 10 times a day. You have to post 20 times a day. If you don't, you're not going to make it. Like, this is what Alex Earl did. This is what this person did. And if they did it that way and it worked, it must work for you. What works for other people is not going to work for you. Even if you think an algorithm has proven that you'll get more likes or more views, that more views doesn't mean it's working for you. If you are having to upend your entire life to make 10 TikTok videos a day that you don't even feel like are fulfilling you in any way, it's maybe not worth it for you. But if you're able to do it in a way that you enjoy the process, then yeah, make as many videos as you want. But like when I think of, for me, doing these video essays, this is something I started because I felt like the information that I was consuming was shallow. I was just seeing all these silly videos on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram that didn't mean anything to me or didn't teach me anything. And so I wanted to cultivate a way that I could continue to learn and teach myself about subjects that I was interested in. And that's why I make these videos, because I can research on my own, take a week to look into things that I'm interested in, and I have these thoughts that pop into my head all the time, and then I can actually look into it and understand it. I really enjoy the editing too, even though it takes a while. And so that's why I've allowed myself about a little over a week to get this done. And if I don't get it done, I'm not going to worry about it, because it's the process that I enjoy. And then also the joy when I get a random one-off comment about someone who says they learned something, because I think that's really cool. I don't know. Okay, and then lastly, I do want to go back to nature, circle back to that in a cyclical way maybe, because a lot of authors and creative people are inspired by nature, and there's just a lot of great quotes that I came across that I wanted to share. So Mary Gateskill, an American novelist, describes writing fiction as a delicate and intimate process that requires a degree of cocooning and should not be interfered with until it's finished. I always think about that one fable of the man who tried to help the butterfly come out of the cocoon. It's this cocoon he sees, and he sees a wing start to poke out, and he really wants to help this butterfly, and so he gets out a knife and helps open it so that the butterfly can get out right away, because he thinks the butterfly is stuck. But once he does that, the butterfly is unable to fly on its own, and that's because the process of the butterfly struggling to get out of the cocoon is what allows its wings to strengthen enough to allow it to fly. I honestly cannot tell you where I heard that from, but that is like one of those childhood fables that has stuck in my head throughout my entire life that I just always think about. And I think it's such a great metaphor for this too, is that for any creative process and anything in your life, you have to go through those struggle periods. You have to do it on your own to allow yourself to have the strength to move into the next period of your life. And then Anne Lamott, another American novelist, has this quote that I love. Most of us figure out by a certain age, some of us later than others, that life unspools in cycles. Some lovely, some painful, but in no predictable order. So you could have lovely, painful, and painful again, which I think we all agree is not all fair. You don't have to like it, and you're always welcome to file a brief with the complaints department. But if you've been around for a while, you'll know that much of the time, if you are patient and you are paying attention, you will see that God will restore what the locusts have taken away. So whether it's actually reconnecting with nature by going on walks or looking out a window, or it's just reconnecting with that natural flow of your life and giving yourself space to have those ups and downs, I think thinking about life on a seasonal, cyclical level is something so important that can help so many of us achieve personal growth in a way that we've never seen before. And I'm just looking forward to being more mindful of it in my own life too. But yeah, that is what I have for today. I did have some other sources on like stress and burnout and how you are not your work and other things with your brain, but I'm thinking I might just do that in either a part 2 episode, or I don't know, find a way to integrate it into another topic next, because I did talk a lot about the brain in my last episode with AI and algorithms, and I didn't want it to be too heavy this time around. So I guess if you have any recommendations or you want to see a part 2 on this video, I can definitely make one. But that's it for now. Please subscribe if you haven't already, because I do have another episode coming out next week, even though I'm not sure what it is yet. It will be discovered shortly. But yeah, thank you for watching this long if you did, and I hope you stick around for the next Bagley related episode. Bye!